I stood at the edge of my cornfield, staring at the fresh tire tracks cutting right through the middle of my crops. Again. Fourth time this week. The white Escalade's trail was unmistakable, deep ruts carved through rows of corn I'd planted 3 months ago, stalks crushed and bent mud, splattered everywhere like some kind of vehicular temper tantrum. Victoria Pemberton, HOA board treasurer. The woman who genuinely believed that her designer sunglasses and her husband's position as HOA president gave her the right to turn my private farmland into her personal shortcut. She claimed she had easement rights. She didn't. I'm Marcus Chen, 47 years old cattle rancher, and the proud owner of 80 acres of land that sits firmly outside any HOA jurisdiction. I bought this property specifically for that reason. But Victoria, she didn't care about property lines, legal documents, or basic human decency. By the end of this story, Victoria's $90,000 Escalade would be sitting on 4 flat tires in the middle of my cornfield. Her lawyer would be begging me not to press charges, and her entire life would unravel in ways she never saw coming. But before we get there, hey, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing this community grow. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button because trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 3 years ago, I walked away from a 25-year career in logistics management. Burnout, they call it. I call it finally realizing that life's too short to spend in conference rooms arguing about shipping manifests. I'd saved well, invested carefully, and when this 80-acre property came up for sale in rural Nebraska, I jumped on it. The land was perfect. Rolling hills, good soil, a creek running through the eastern section, and most importantly, it was located just outside the Meadowbrook Estates HOA boundary. I'd heard enough horror stories about HOAs to know I wanted nothing to do with them. I wanted space freedom and the right to do what I wanted with my own property. I built up the farm slowly. Started with 20 head of cattle, planted corn and soybeans, renovated the old farmhouse, and converted the barn into a functional workspace. The property had a long private driveway that connected to County Road 47, about half a mile of gravel road that I maintained myself. It was peaceful, quiet. Exactly what I dreamed about during all those years of corporate stress. Meadowbrook Estates sat adjacent to my western boundary, a gated community of oversized houses, manicured lawns, and people who thought paying $700 a month in HOA fees made them royalty. The community had its own entrance off the main highway, a good 3 miles from where my property connected to County Road 47. Victoria Pemberton lived in one of the bigger houses in Meadowbrook. Her husband Richard was the HOA president, had been for 6 years. Victoria herself served as the treasurer, which should have been my first warning sign about what kind of person she was. They drove matching luxury vehicles, threw elaborate parties, and from what my neighbor Dale told me, ruled the HOA like their personal fiefdom. 6 months ago, the trespassing started. I was checking on my cattle one morning when I heard an engine roaring through my cornfield. I turned around and saw this white Escalade barreling through my property like it was a damn highway. The vehicle cut diagonally across my land, flattening corn, kicking up mud, and disappeared toward the Meadowbrook Estates back gate. I was stunned, confused. This was private property, clearly marked, clearly fenced on most sides. Who the hell would just drive through someone's farm? 2 days later, it happened again. Same white Escalade, same route, same disregard for the fact that she was destroying my crops. The third time I was ready. I drove my truck out to intercept her, blocking her path. The Escalade skidded to a stop, and Victoria rolled down her window with this annoyed expression like I was the one inconveniencing her. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone polite despite my anger. "This is private property. You can't just drive through here." She looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "There's an easement," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "From the 1960s. It's in the county records. I have every right to use this route." "I own this land," I replied. "There's no easement on my property deed. You need to stop." She put her sunglasses back on and smiled at me, this condescending ice-cold smile. "Check the records, honey. This has been a through route for decades. You're new here. You wouldn't understand." Then she drove around my truck right through another section of my corn and disappeared. I was furious, but I'm not a hothead. I went straight to my property lawyer, a guy named Jim Sutton who'd handled my land purchase. I explained the situation and asked him to verify if there was any easement on my property. Jim did a complete title search. 2 days later, he called me back. "Marcus, there's no easement," he said definitively. "Your title is clean. No historical easements, no rights of way, nothing. If someone's driving through your property, they're trespassing. Period." Armed with that information, I thought the problem would be easy to solve. I was wrong. Victoria didn't just continue driving through my property, she escalated. Twice a day now, like clockwork. 7:15 in the morning on her way to whatever country club or shopping trip she had planned, and around 5 in the evening on her way back. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, tire track photos. My corn was getting destroyed, and even worse, her route passed close to where my cattle grazed. Cows are surprisingly sensitive animals. The sound of Victoria's engine roaring through at 35 miles per hour spooked them constantly. I had 3 pregnant heifers that were due to calve in the spring, and I was genuinely worried about the stress affecting them. I installed private property, no trespassing signs all along her route. Big signs reflective, impossible to miss. Victoria didn't even slow down. I decided to try the official route. I drafted a formal cease and desist letter with Jim's help outlining the trespassing, the property damage, and warning Victoria that continued violations would result in legal action. I sent it certified mail, so there'd be proof she received it. She did receive it. I have the signature confirmation. 3 days later, I was working in my barn when I heard her Escalade coming through. I ran out and saw her tear open the envelope I'd sent, glance at it, then throw it out her window into my field. The pieces of paper scattered across the mud as she accelerated away, horn blaring. That was it. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Morrison showed up about an hour later. He was a decent guy, probably in his early 30s, and he actually listened to what I had to say. I showed him the tire tracks, the damaged crops, the signs, and the documentation I'd been keeping. He took notes, seemed genuinely sympathetic. "I'll go talk to her," he said. "Get her side of the story." He came back 2 hours later with a frustrated expression. "Mr. Chen, she's claiming you're harassing her," he said. "She showed me some documents that she says prove there's an easement. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't verify them, but she's adamant. She also said you've been threatening her." "That's completely false," I said, feeling my blood pressure rising. "I have never threatened her. And those documents about an easement, they're fake." My lawyer confirmed there's no easement. Deputy Morrison nodded. "I believe you, but here's the problem. This is a civil property dispute. Unless I catch her in the act of trespassing and she refuses to leave when told there's not much I can do from a criminal standpoint, you're going to need to handle this through the courts." I thanked him for his time, but inside I was seething. The legal system was going to let this woman destroy my property while I spent months and thousands of dollars fighting her in court. I decided to take matters into my own hands, legally of course. I bought a heavy-duty steel gate and installed it across the path Victoria had been using. It was a proper gate locked with a thick chain and padlock. I installed it on a Friday evening. Saturday morning, Victoria's route would be blocked. Saturday morning came. I was in my kitchen having coffee when I heard the familiar sound of her engine. Then I heard screeching brakes, shouting, and the unmistakable sound of metal being cut. I ran outside and got there just in time to see Victoria using bolt cutters. Bolt cutters she apparently kept in her vehicle for exactly this purpose, to cut through my chain. The gate fell open and she drove through, giving me the middle finger as she passed. I had a trail camera hidden nearby. It caught everything. I called the sheriff's office again. Deputy Morrison came out, reviewed the trail camera footage, and agreed that Victoria had just committed criminal property destruction. "I'll file a report," he said. "But honestly, Mr. Chen, you need to get a lawyer involved. This is escalating." The next week I received a letter from Victoria's lawyer, some fancy law firm out of Omaha. The letter was absurd. It claimed I was interfering with established usage rights and creating dangerous conditions by blocking Victoria's route. It threatened legal action against me if I didn't remove all barriers from the easement. Jim, my lawyer, drafted a response that was basically a legal middle finger. He reiterated that no easement existed, documented Victoria's trespassing and property destruction, and warned that we would pursue damages if she didn't stop immediately. Victoria's response was to hire a different lawyer, this time from her HOA's legal team. They sent an even more aggressive letter claiming the HOA had historical documentation proving the easement and that I was in violation of community access agreements. It was all bullshit, but it was expensive bullshit. Jim told me that if I wanted to take this to court, we were looking at 18 months of litigation and probably $30,000 in legal fees. Even if I won, which he was confident I would, I'd be out massive amounts of time and money. Meanwhile, Victoria was getting bolder. She started honking her horn as she drove through my property, deliberately trying to scare my cattle. She'd accelerate through the muddiest parts of my field, sending up huge plumes of dirt and mud. It was like she was trying to provoke me. Then the worst thing happened. One of my best heifers, a beautiful Angus named Daisy, was about 6 weeks from calving. She was one of my original cows, had given me 3 healthy calves already, and I had high hopes for her next one. The bloodline was excellent, and I'd already had interest from other ranchers in buying the calf. On a Tuesday morning in early March, Victoria came roaring through at her usual time. Her horn was blaring and she was going even faster than normal. Daisy was grazing near the route. The noise and the sudden appearance of the Escalade sent her into a panic. She ran, stumbled, and fell. I found her an hour later. She'd miscarried. The calf was dead. I called the vet immediately. Dr. Patterson came out, examined Daisy, and confirmed what I already knew. The stress from being frightened had caused her to miscarry. He gave her medications to prevent infection and help her recover, but the calf was gone. $4,500. That's what I lost, not counting the emotional toll of losing an animal I'd cared for. I had the vet write up a detailed report documenting everything. I filed another police report. I sent another certified letter to Victoria. I documented everything with my lawyer. Nothing changed. Victoria kept driving through my property like she owned it. My neighbor Dale, who ran a soybean operation adjacent to my southern boundary, witnessed several of Victoria's trespassing incidents. He offered to testify if I needed him to. He also shared something interesting. Apparently the whole Meadowbrook Estates community knew about Victoria's shortcut, and most of them thought she was crazy for pushing it this far. I was at my breaking point. The legal system was too slow, too expensive, and too ineffective. Victoria had the backing of her HOA, her husband's position, and apparently an endless supply of lawyers. She thought she was untouchable. That's when I started researching creative solutions. And that's when I found out about spike strips. I spent 3 days researching spike strips from every legal angle I could find. I read case law, consulted online legal forums, and finally brought the idea to Jim. Is it legal? I asked him directly. Can I deploy spike strips on my own property to stop a repeated trespasser? Jim leaned back in his chair, considering the question carefully. It's a gray area, he admitted. But here's the thing, you have the right to protect your property from damage. Victoria has been warned repeatedly, there's documented trespassing, and you've exhausted reasonable alternatives. If you provide adequate warning, and I mean very clear visible warning, then yes, I believe it would be legal. Define adequate warning, I said. Multiple signs clearly visible, stating that vehicle deterrent devices are in use. Signs every 50 feet minimum along her route. And I'd recommend sending her one final certified letter with photos of the signs explicitly stating what you're doing and why. Will I get sued? I asked. Jim smiled. Probably. But based on everything we have documented, I like our chances. More importantly, the spike strips won't cause physical harm to her, just vehicle damage. That's a crucial distinction. You're not setting up a dangerous trap meant to hurt people. You're deploying a device meant to disable vehicles that are trespassing on clearly marked private property. What about criminal charges? I pressed. Unlikely, Jim said. Especially if you notify law enforcement ahead of time. Be transparent. Show them your documentation, your warnings, everything. Make it clear you're not hiding anything. That was good enough for me. I ordered professional-grade spike strips online, the retractable kind that police use at vehicle checkpoints. They're designed to puncture tires without causing vehicles to flip or roll, which was important for safety reasons. I didn't want to hurt Victoria no matter how angry I was. I just wanted to stop her from destroying my property. The strips arrived within a week. 3 sets, each 10 feet long. I spent the next several days preparing my property like I was building a legal fortress. I installed additional trail cameras with night vision and motion sensors covering every possible angle of the route Victoria used. I wanted video evidence from multiple perspectives. Then came the signs. I ordered 30 custom signs from a professional signage company. Each one was 3 feet by 2 feet reflective and printed with bold red letters. Warning private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Vehicle deterrent devices in use. Tire damage will occur. I installed these signs every 50 feet along Victoria's entire route through my property. I took photos of every single sign from multiple angles, GPS tagged each location, and documented everything with timestamps. The property looked like a federal security zone. There was absolutely no way anyone could drive through without seeing at least a dozen of these warnings. Next, I drafted one final certified letter to Victoria. Jim helped me word it carefully. The letter included a summary of her 6 months of trespassing, copies of all previous warnings, documentation of property damage, including the vet bill for Daisy, photos of all the new warning signs I'd installed, an explicit statement that I had deployed vehicle deterrent devices spike strips along her trespassing route. A final warning to cease all trespassing immediately. I sent the letter certified mail with return receipt requested. I kept copies of everything. 3 days later, I got my response not from Victoria but from her HOA's lawyer. The letter accused me of making terroristic threats, claimed I was creating dangerous conditions, and threatened to seek a restraining order against me. It was exactly the response I'd expected. They were trying to intimidate me. It wasn't going to work. I took all my documentation to the sheriff's office and asked to speak with Deputy Morrison. I showed him everything: the months of trespassing evidence, the property damage, the warnings, the new signs, and yes, the spike strips. I want to be completely transparent, I told him. I'm not hiding anything. Victoria Pemberton has destroyed my property for 6 months, despite repeated warnings. I've exhausted every reasonable option. The spike strips are deployed with clear warning signs. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want her to stop trespassing. Deputy Morrison reviewed everything carefully. He walked out to my property and looked at the signs himself. Finally, he said, "Off the record, I don't blame you one bit. On the record, I have to tell you to be very careful. If she gets hurt, even if it's her own fault, you could face liability." "I understand," I said, "but she won't get hurt. The strips are designed to puncture tires, not cause accidents." He nodded slowly. "All right, you've documented everything properly. You've given fair warning. I can't tell you this is a good idea, but I also can't tell you it's illegal." That was as close to approval as I was going to get. I spent that Sunday evening deploying the spike strips. I positioned them strategically along Victoria's route, 3 sets spaced about 30 yards apart. I tested them first with my old farm truck to make sure they worked as intended and wouldn't cause the vehicle to lose control. They worked perfectly. 4 quick punctures, tires deflated within seconds, but the vehicle remained stable and controllable. Everything was set. Victoria's typical Monday morning commute was at 7:15 a.m. I'd be ready. I barely slept Sunday night. I kept running through scenarios in my head, questioning whether I was doing the right thing, wondering if I'd missed any legal angles. But every time doubt crept in, I thought about Daisy, about the thousands of dollars in crop damage, about 6 months of being ignored and dismissed. No. Victoria had made her choice repeatedly. Now she'd face the consequences. Monday morning I was up at 6 a.m. I made coffee, checked all the camera feeds on my laptop, and positioned myself in my barn where I had a clear view of 3 different monitor screens, showing live feeds from different angles. 6:45. 7 o'clock. 7:10. My heart was pounding. Part of me wondered if maybe she wouldn't come today. Maybe the weekend had brought some sense into her. Maybe she'd finally read my warning letter and decided to stop. 7:14 a.m. I saw movement at the tree line on the western edge of my property. The white Escalade appeared right on schedule. I watched on the monitors as Victoria's vehicle approached the first warning sign. She didn't even slow down. The sign was 3 feet tall, bright yellow and red, impossible to miss in the morning light. She drove right past it at what looked like 35 miles per hour. Second sign, third sign, fourth sign. She wasn't stopping. She wasn't slowing. She was driving through my property like she had every legal right to be there, like all my warnings meant absolutely nothing. My hands were shaking as I watched the monitors. The camera angles were perfect. I could see her vehicle from 3 different perspectives as it approached the first spike strip. 20 yards, 15 yards, 10 yards. The Escalade hit the first spike strip. Pop, pop. Even from inside the barn, I heard the sound of the front tires exploding. On the monitor, I saw the vehicle lurch forward, the front end dipping as the tires rapidly deflated. But Victoria didn't stop. She probably thought she'd hit a pothole or run over debris. She kept going. 5 seconds later, the rear tires hit the same strip. Pop, pop. Now the Escalade was riding on 4 deflating tires. I saw the brake lights flash. Victoria had finally realized something was wrong. But she still had forward momentum, and she was rolling on shredding rubber and bending rims. 15 yards later, she hit the second spike strip. This time the sounds were sharper, metal on metal, as her damaged rims struck the spikes. Whatever tire pressure remained was gone now. The Escalade was riding on 4 completely flat tires and damaged wheel rims. Victoria was still trying to brake, but the vehicle was barely responding. She rolled forward another 20 yards before hitting the third and final spike strip, my insurance policy. The final set of spikes shredded what was left of her tires completely. Strips of rubber flew in different directions. The Escalade finally came to a complete stop, about 50 yards past the last spike strip, sitting in the middle of my cornfield on 4 destroyed tires and visibly damaged rims. I immediately saved all the camera footage to 3 different locations: local hard drive, cloud backup, and an external USB drive I'd prepared specifically for this purpose. The evidence was secure. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Escalade just sat there, engine still running, brake lights on. I could see Victoria through the windshield, though not clearly enough to see her expression. She was sitting completely still, probably in shock. Then her door opened. Victoria climbed out of her vehicle slowly, like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. She walked around to the front of the Escalade, looked at the destroyed tires, then walked around to the back. Even from the camera angle, I could see the moment full realization hit her. She started screaming. I couldn't hear the words from the barn, but her body language was clear. She was furious, gesturing wildly, kicking at one of the flat tires and then pulling out her phone. I picked up my phone and called the sheriff's office. "This is Marcus Chen, on County Road 47, I said calmly when the dispatcher answered. "I have an active trespasser on my property who has damaged their vehicle by ignoring multiple warning signs about vehicle deterrent devices. I need a deputy to respond for a trespassing incident." The dispatcher took my information and said someone would be there within 20 minutes. I gathered all my documentation, property deed copies of all warnings, sent to Victoria photos of the signs, camera footage on a laptop, and the vet bill for Daisy. Everything was organized in a large folder. Then I walked out to meet Victoria. The walk from my barn to where the Escalade sat in my cornfield took about 3 minutes. I could hear Victoria shouting into her phone the entire time. As I got closer, I caught fragments of the conversation. Completely destroyed. "Yes, all 4 tires. I don't care what time it is, I need you here now. Sue him for everything." She saw me approaching, and her voice changed immediately. "What did you do to my car?" she screamed, her face bright red with rage. "You psycho!" "You tried to kill me," I stopped, about 10 feet away, keeping my expression neutral and my voice calm. "You ignored multiple warnings on my private property, Victoria. This is the consequence of 6 months of trespassing. Consequence. Consequence." She was shaking with anger. "I'm going to sue you for everything you own. Do you have any idea how much this vehicle costs? You're going to pay for this, and then I'm going to make sure you lose this property. My husband will destroy you." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app, making sure she could see I was recording. "Victoria, you've been trespassing on my property for 6 months. I sent you multiple certified letters warning you to stop. You destroyed my gate. Your trespassing caused one of my cows to miscarry. I installed warning signs every 50 feet telling you that vehicle deterrent devices were in use. You ignored every single warning." "Those signs are fake," she shouted, pointing at the nearest one. "This is HOA land. My lawyer has the documents proving there's an easement here. You're the one trespassing on community property. Show me the documents right now," I said calmly, "or stop lying." She opened her mouth, closed it, then pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. You're going to jail for this." "You do that," I replied. "I've already called the sheriff." Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. She started recording me on her phone, holding it up like it was some kind of weapon. "I want everyone to see this," she announced loudly, speaking to her phone. "This man has trapped me on his property. He set up spike strips to destroy my vehicle. This is attempted murder. This is assault with a deadly weapon. I'm being held hostage here, and I fear for my life." I had to resist the urge to laugh at the absurdity. Instead, I looked directly at her camera and spoke clearly. "My name is Marcus Chen. This is my private property. Victoria Pemberton is trespassing. She has been trespassing repeatedly for 6 months despite multiple warnings. She destroyed a locked gate on my property last month. Her trespassing directly caused one of my pregnant cows to miscarry, costing me $4,500. I have everything documented. All of this has been reported to law enforcement." Victoria was warned repeatedly about vehicle deterrent devices in writing and with signs posted every 50 feet along her trespassing route. She chose to ignore those warnings. "Liar," Victoria shouted. "You're making this up. My husband is the HOA president. We have rights here. This land is part of the community access agreement." "There is no community access agreement," I said firmly. "There is no easement. You're trespassing, and you know it." Before she could respond, I heard a vehicle approaching. Deputy Morrison's patrol car appeared on the gravel road, lights flashing. He drove carefully into my field, parking about 20 yards from the scene. Victoria immediately changed her demeanor. Her face transformed from rage to victimhood in seconds. As Deputy Morrison approached, she ran toward him. "Officer, thank God you're here," she said, her voice taking on this dramatic, frightened quality. "This man tried to murder me. He set traps on public property. Look what he did to my car. This is attempted vehicular homicide. He needs to be arrested immediately. Deputy Morrison looked at the Escalade, then at me, then back at Victoria. Ma'am, can you slow down and explain what happened? I was driving to an appointment, Victoria said, tears suddenly appearing in her eyes. I was using the community easement that goes through this property. It's been here for decades. It's perfectly legal, and suddenly my tires exploded. All 4 of them, he set up spike strips to kill me. It's a miracle I didn't crash and die. Deputy Morrison pulled out his notepad. Mr. Chen, I walked over calmly and handed him the folder I'd prepared. Deputy, you and I spoke last week about this situation. Victoria Pemberton has been repeatedly trespassing on my property for 6 months. This folder contains my property deed, showing clear title with no easements, copies of all warnings. I've sent her documentation of her property destruction and the cattle miscarriage she caused, and photos of the warning signs I get installed. I sent you copies of most of this last week. He flipped through the folder, nodding slowly. I remember. And the spike strips deployed with explicit warnings, I said. Signs every 50 feet stating that vehicle deterrent devices were in use. I also sent Mrs. Pemberton a certified letter with photos of the signs explicitly warning her about the spike strips. She received it 4 days ago. That's not true, Victoria interrupted. He never sent me anything, and those signs are fake. This is HOA land. Deputy Morrison looked at her. Ma'am, do you have any documentation showing you have a legal right to use this property? My lawyer has everything, she said quickly. Call him. He has all the easement documents, all the community agreements. This has been established for decades. Do you personally have any documents with you? Deputy Morrison pressed. Victoria faltered. No, not with me, but my lawyer, ma'am. Deputy Morrison interrupted gently but firmly. That's not how property rights work. If you're claiming an easement, you need to provide proof. Mr. Chen has his property deed right here showing clear title. He turned to me. Can I see the warning letter you sent? I pulled out my phone and showed him the certified mail receipt and the signed delivery confirmation. Delivered last Thursday. She signed for it herself. Victoria's face went pale, then red again. This is ridiculous. You're taking his side because this is discrimination. My husband will have your badge. Deputy Morrison's expression hardened slightly. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Threatening law enforcement isn't going to help your situation. My situation. What about his situation? He tried to kill me. The spike strips are designed to disable vehicles, not harm occupants, I said calmly. They're the same kind law enforcement uses. Victoria was warned in writing and with multiple signs. She chose to ignore those warnings while trespassing. Deputy Morrison walked over to examine the nearest warning sign, then came back. Mr. Chen, I need to ask, do you want to press charges for trespassing and property damage? I looked at Victoria. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked genuinely shocked that this was happening, like she'd truly believed her position, and her husband's status made her immune to consequences. But then I thought about Daisy, about 6 months of destroyed crops, about being dismissed, ignored, and treated like my property rights meant nothing. Yes, I said firmly. I absolutely want to press charges. Victoria's face went through several shades of color, red to white, to an almost grayish pale. The reality of the situation was finally truly sinking in. You can't arrest me, she said, her voice losing its confidence. This is a civil matter. Property disputes are civil. You said so yourself last time. Deputy Morrison pulled out his citation book. Criminal trespassing isn't civil, ma'am, especially after multiple documented warnings and when property damage is involved. And based on what Mr. Chen showed me last week about the destroyed gate, there could be additional charges. The gate. Victoria's eyes went wide. I don't know what you're talking about. I never touched any gate. I have trail camera footage, I said. Clear video of you cutting my chain with bolt cutters. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The lies were catching up to her. Deputy Morrison started writing. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm citing you for criminal trespassing. Depending on what the district attorney decides, there may be additional charges for property destruction. You'll have a court date in approximately 3 weeks. The citation will have all the details. This is insane, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its edge. She was starting to sound desperate. Richard is going to Hill. I need to call him. She pulled out her phone and dialed. We all stood there in awkward silence while it rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. She tried again. Still no answer. He's probably in a meeting, she muttered, then dialed another number. I'm calling my lawyer. This time someone answered, but I could hear the response even from where I stood. Victoria, it's 7:45 in the morning. Unless this is an emergency, it is an emergency, she practically shrieked. I'm stuck on that property I told you about, and this man has destroyed my car, and the police are trying to arrest me. There was a long pause on the other end. Victoria, I told you not to use that route anymore. I specifically advised you to stop going through that property. Her face went even paler. But you said you told me, I told you we'd explore your options legally. I never told you to keep trespassing. Listen, I can't talk about this over the phone. Stop talking to anyone, don't sign anything, and call my office during business hours. The lawyer hung up. Victoria stood there staring at her phone like it had betrayed her. Deputy Morrison finished writing the citation and handed it to her. Ma'am, we need to get your vehicle out of this field. I'm going to call for a tow truck. How much is that going to cost? Victoria asked quietly. The deputy pulled out his phone and made the call. 10 minutes later, he had an answer. Tow truck driver says $450 to extract the vehicle from the field plus $120 per day if you need it impounded. $450. Victoria looked like she might cry. I don't have that much cash on me. Do you have anyone who can bring you money? Deputy Morrison asked. She tried calling Richard again. No answer. She tried 2 more numbers. Friends, maybe, but either no one answered or they couldn't help. Can they tow it to my house instead? She asked desperately. The deputy relayed the question. He says yes, but that's additional mileage. It'll be $650 total. Victoria looked like she was doing mental math about her credit cards. Fine, whatever. Just get this nightmare over with. While we waited for the tow truck, I brought up something I'd been holding back. Deputy, I want to add to my complaint. The miscarried heifer that happened because Victoria repeatedly drove through my property at high speed, honking her horn, scaring my cattle. I have a vet report documenting that the miscarriage was caused by stress. That's $4,500 in damages. Deputy Morrison added it to his notes. The DA will review everything and determine what charges to file. The tow truck arrived 20 minutes later. The driver, a guy in his 50s named Walt, took one look at the Escalade and whistled. Lady, you did a number on this thing. All 4 tires, shredded rims are bent to hell. You're looking at new tires plus rims. Probably $3,200, maybe more depending on what else got damaged. Victoria didn't respond. She just stood there looking defeated. Walt hooked up the Escalade and carefully winched it onto his flatbed. The whole process took about 30 minutes. Victoria paid with a credit card, her hands shaking slightly as she signed the receipt. Deputy Morrison looked at her. Mrs. Pemberton, do you need a ride home? She nodded numbly. Before she left, she turned to me. The fury was gone now, replaced with something that looked like genuine fear. Richard is going to sue you for everything, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. The HOA will destroy you. You'll lose this property. You'll lose everything. I met her eyes steadily. Victoria, I'm not in your HOA. Your husband has no power here, and I didn't do anything illegal. You did. Multiple times. For 6 months. This is on you. She didn't have a response to that. Deputy Morrison drove her away. Walt followed with the Escalade on his flatbed, and I was left standing alone in my cornfield, suddenly exhausted. I walked back to my barn, sat down at my laptop, and made multiple copies of all the morning's camera footage. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. Everything was justified. But even as I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. I was right. 2 days passed quietly. I half expected Victoria to come back with her husband and a legal team, but nothing happened. My property was peaceful again. No white Escalade tearing through my cornfield. No horn blaring to scare my cattle. Just the quiet sounds of farm life I'd moved here for in the first place. On Wednesday, a certified letter arrived from Victoria's lawyer, not the HOA lawyer this time, but a personal attorney from a different firm. The letter threatened legal action for property damage to her vehicle, claimed the spike strips constituted reckless endangerment, and demanded I pay for all repairs plus compensation for her emotional distress. The amount they were seeking, $42,000. I forwarded the letter to Jim immediately. He called me back within an hour, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Let me handle this, he said. This is actually good news. How is a lawsuit for $42,000 good news, I asked. Because they're overplaying their hand, Jim explained. They're claiming emotional distress and reckless endangerment when you have 6 months of documented trespassing, multiple warnings, and clear signage. I'm going to draft a response that not only refutes their claims, but also files a counterclaim. For what? For everything she's actually done. 6 months of trespassing, that's roughly 240 individual incidents at minimum. Property damage to your gate. Destruction of crops, I'll need you to calculate the actual value of the corn she destroyed. The vet bill for your miscarried heifer. Emotional distress for having to deal with 6 months of harassment. and I'm going to push for punitive damages because her behavior was willful and malicious. Jim did the math. The total came to $28,000 in actual damages. With punitive damages, we could potentially seek more. Send them the counter notice, I told Jim. Let's see what happens. Jim's response letter was a masterpiece. It systematically destroyed every claim in Victoria's lawsuit, provided overwhelming documentation of her trespassing, and presented our counterclaim with all supporting evidence. He sent it certified mail to both Victoria's personal lawyer and her HOA's legal team. The response was silence. Complete silence. A week went by with no legal communication at all. I started to relax slightly, thinking maybe Victoria had finally realized she couldn't win this fight. Then Dale, my neighbor, called me with interesting news. "Marcus, you need to hear what's going on in Meadowbrook Estates," he said. "It's all over town." Apparently Victoria's spike strip incident had made local news. Not the big news stations, but the community Facebook groups and the local newspaper's website. Someone had posted about it, and the story spread like wildfire. People were discussing it everywhere, at the coffee shop, at the grocery store, at church. But the interesting part wasn't the trespassing story. It was what happened after. A woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to me, just coincidence, who served on the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board as the assistant treasurer, had started asking questions. She'd heard about Victoria using HOA legal funds to fight her battle with me, and she wanted to know if that was appropriate. When she started digging into the HOA's financial records, which she had access to as assistant treasurer, she found discrepancies. Lots of discrepancies. Patricia called for an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss the financial irregularities. Richard Pemberton, as president, tried to shut it down, but Patricia had already contacted enough board members to force the meeting. Dale didn't have all the details, but the rumor was that Victoria had been embezzling from the HOA for at least 2 years. Using HOA funds for personal expenses, paying her personal legal bills with community money, even using HOA credit cards for shopping trips and spa days. They're talking about criminal charges, Dale told me. Embezzlement, fraud, theft. The whole 9 yards. I was stunned. I'd known Victoria was entitled and arrogant, but actual embezzlement, that was a whole different level. Over the next week, more details emerged. The HOA held their emergency meeting and voted to place both Victoria and Richard on immediate suspension from the board, pending a full financial audit. They hired a forensic accountant to review all the records from the past 5 years. The audit revealed that Victoria had embezzled approximately $60,000 over 2 years. She'd been clever about it, small amounts here and there, personal expenses categorized as community needs, HOA vendor payments that actually went to her personal contractors. But it all added up. The HOA filed a police report. The county sheriff's office opened an investigation, and suddenly Victoria had much bigger problems than a trespassing citation and a destroyed Escalade. The easement documents Victoria had claimed to have, they never existed. She'd completely made them up, apparently believing that her position as treasurer and her husband's position as president meant no one would question her. Richard Pemberton resigned from the HOA board in disgrace. Whether he'd known about the embezzlement or was just negligently ignorant, he was done. The community turned against them both. Victoria and Richard put their house up for sale 2 weeks after the spike strip incident. According to Dale, they were trying to get out before the criminal charges officially came down. My court date for the trespassing case arrived in mid-April. Victoria appeared with a different lawyer, her third one, and pleaded guilty to criminal trespassing in exchange for the property destruction charges being reduced to a misdemeanor. The judge ordered her to pay me restitution for documented damages, $8,500 total, covering the destroyed gate calculated crop loss and the vet bill for Daisy. It wasn't the full $28,000 Jim had calculated, but it was something. Victoria was also placed on 12 months probation with a specific condition: she was forbidden from coming within 500 feet of my property. Essentially a protective order. She didn't look at me once during the entire court proceeding. She looked diminished, somehow smaller, older, defeated. I used the restitution money to install a proper fence along my entire western boundary. Not to keep Victoria out specifically, she was legally barred from my property now, but to prevent any future problems with other entitled Meadowbrook residents. The fence was beautiful. 8 feet tall reinforced steel posts with proper gates at the access points. It cost more than the $8,000 I received, but it was worth it for the peace of mind. 2 months later, Victoria was formally charged with embezzlement and fraud. The criminal case was still pending last I heard, but her lawyer was trying to negotiate a plea deal. She was looking at potential jail time, major fines, and permanent restitution to the HOA. Richard divorced her. According to the local gossip, he claimed he hadn't known about the embezzlement and wanted to protect his own assets. Whether that was true or just self-preservation, I didn't know or care. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA got new leadership, people who actually seemed to care about transparency and following rules. They sent me a formal apology letter, which I appreciated. My farm returned to its peaceful rhythm. The corn grew back where Victoria had destroyed it. Daisy recovered from her miscarriage and was successfully bred again. The cattle grazed peacefully without anyone honking horns at them. One evening in late summer, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when I thought about the whole situation. It had started with such a simple thing, someone using my property as a shortcut, but it had revealed so much about entitlement, accountability, and the importance of standing up for yourself. Victoria had thought her position, her husband's authority, and her wealth made her above the rules. She'd thought she could ignore property rights, legal warnings, and basic human decency because she'd gotten away with it before in other contexts. She was wrong. And the truly ironic thing, if she'd just stopped after my first warning, none of this would have happened. The trespassing citations, the destroyed Escalade, the public humiliation, the embezzlement investigation, the divorce, all of it could have been avoided if she'd simply respected someone else's property rights. But people like Victoria don't think that way. They push and push until something pushes back harder. I took a sip of my coffee and watched my cattle grazing in the evening light. No tire tracks through my corn. No entitled HOA treasurer treating my farm like her personal highway. Just peace, quiet, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd defended what was mine through completely legal means. The spike strips were still in my barn, carefully stored away. I'd never deployed them again, never needed to. But their existence and what had happened when Victoria ignored the warnings about them had become something of a local legend. Sometimes standing up to a bully means letting them destroy themselves while standing on the right side of the law. And sometimes karma doesn't need any help. It just needs documentation, patience, and spike strips. Looking back on everything that happened with Victoria, I've realized something important about life that I want to share with all of you watching this. We live in a world where some people genuinely believe that rules don't apply to them. Maybe it's because of their position, their wealth, their connections, or just years of getting away with bad behavior. These people push boundaries constantly, taking a little more each time, testing to see how far they can go before someone finally says no. Victoria Pemberton wasn't born entitled. She became that way through years of no one holding her accountable. Every time she pushed a boundary and got away with it, it reinforced her belief that she was special, that she was above the rules everyone else had to follow. But here's the truth. Accountability always comes eventually. It might take time. It might require patience and documentation and standing your ground when it feels easier to just give in. But it comes. The most important lesson I learned from this whole experience isn't about spike strips or trespassing laws. It's about the importance of standing up for yourself with integrity. I didn't escalate to violence. I didn't break any laws. I didn't resort to the kind of behavior Victoria displayed. I simply enforced my legal rights through documented, transparent means. That matters. Because when everything ended up in court, when the lawyers got involved, when the community started asking questions, I could stand there with a clear conscience, knowing I'd done everything the right way. There's power in that, real power. Not the fake authority that comes from a title or a position, but the genuine strength that comes from knowing you're right and having the evidence to prove it. If you're dealing with someone like Victoria in your own life, someone who's taking advantage of you, ignoring your boundaries, or using their position to push you around, document everything. Every incident, every warning, every attempt at resolution. Be patient but firm. Stand your ground legally and ethically. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply letting someone's own actions catch up with them while standing on the right side of the law and watching karma do its work. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Have you ever dealt with someone who thought they were above the rules? How did you handle it? What did you learn? Share your experiences below. This community is built on these shared stories of standing up for ourselves and supporting each other. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button right now. We share these kinds of stories every week, real accounts of people standing up to entitled neighbors, corrupt HOAs, and bullies who thought they'd never face consequences. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Remember, your property is yours. Your boundaries matter, and no one, no matter how important they think they are, has the right to treat you like you're invisible. Stand your ground, document everything, and trust that eventually accountability catches up to everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.